Some others have asked me to say something about Atma, Karma, rebirth, and my take on all these subjects. He has mentioned the 22nd slok from the second chapter of Gita. Pasangshi jirnani jatha vihayo navani grinnati narhoparani tatha sharirani vihayo jirnanno nani samjati navani dehi. Beautiful slok. Just as a person casts off worn out garments and puts on new ones, so the embodied soul casts off worn out bodies and enters others that are new. Beautiful sloka, no? Another Sannasini, she's sitting there, okay, yes, I have recognized you. She asked me about my thoughts on the 20th slok from the same chapter, that is the second chapter from the Gita. No jayate mriyate bakadachi. Next. Nayang bhutta bhavita va na bhuyo ajo nitya shashvata ham purana na hannate hannamana sharire. This 20th slok from the second chapter of Gita is very interesting because in the Kathopanishad, in part 2, verse 18, we find another slok which says, No jayate mriyate va vipaschin, nayam kutaschinna babhuva kaschit, ajo nitya shashvataham purana, na hannate hannamana sharire. Look, only 2 or 3 words have been changed, and as you all may know that the Upanishads are much earlier than the Gita, so it can be safely said that this slok in Gita has been lifted from Kathopanishad. Okay. Now, in order to appreciate my understanding about karma and rebirth, you have to delve sincerely and deeply into my Thakur's brilliant discourse of 2nd September 1985. I know of no discourse more profound or of greater value than this very discourse for understanding the soul or the afterlife. Now, look, the moment we speak of post-death existence, or for that matter the soul, the twin notions of karma and rebirth emerge. Don't they? Thus, a thoughtful reflection upon these two concepts becomes indispensable. Now, the doctrines of karma and rebirth from the twin pillars of Indian spiritual and philosophical thought, weaving a profound narrative of cosmic justice, existential continuity, and you may say ultimate liberation. Together, these two concepts of karma and rebirth, they rescue human existence from the tyranny of random chance, suggesting instead that the universe operates under a flawless, self-sustaining moral equilibrium. Don't they? So, to explore karma and rebirth is to delve into a grand metaphysical tapestry where the soul is both the architect of its destiny and the pilgrim of eternity. Now, what does karma mean? At its core, the doctrine of karma dictates a simple truth. We reap what we sow. Okay? In Bengali, we say, Jemon kormo temon phal. Even in the primary Bible, the Galatians, we find Apostle Paul's famous warning that your harvest is directly tied to what you plant. Almost same meaning. The Buddhists, you see, they may reject the idea of a permanent eternal soul, the Atma, but they fully embrace the law of karma. Don't they? We find in the Samyukta Nikaya, Buddha saying, according to the seed that's sown, so is the fruit you reap therefrom. Doer of good will gather good, doer of evil reaps evil. Same meaning. Jeman kormo, teman fal. Okay? Understood? Yet, a more profound question lies beneath the surface. How exactly does this law of sowing and reaping operate? Within Indian spiritual philosophical traditions, two distinct paradigms emerge to answer this question. One you may call transcendental or metaphysical, the other you can call psychic or cognitive. The transcendental explanation, familiar to many, it operates on an unseen moral ledger. When we perform a noble deed, it generates punna, a form of unseen karmic merit. This merit is a metaphysical currency, It cannot be perceived by the physical senses. Yet it has the power to fundamentally alter our destiny, manifesting as favorable circumstances either later in this life or in a future birth or incarnation. Conversely, a harmful action generates pap, karmic demerit. This spiritual debt inevitably matures into adversity, binding the individual to unfavorable experiences in this life or in the lives to come. Understood? This is what the transcendental or metaphysical narrative of karma is all about. Now, this transcendental explanation of karma is very important to understand how my Thakur works upon and liberates souls. Now, let's look into the psychic explanation of karma. This psychic framework of karma shifts the theater of karma from external destiny to the internal architecture of the mind. Here, every action we perform leaves behind sanskaras, which are actually latent mental impressions that settle into the fertile soil of our subconscious and unconscious mind. A good action implants a positive sanskar, subtly inclining us toward similar virtuous behavior in the future. Now, over time, these reinforced impressions crystallize into good habits, and habits ultimately forge human character. Character, after all, is a beautifully woven bundle of habits. From a refined character, noble actions flow effortlessly, initiating a sublime virtuous cycle. In the same way, the inverse holds true. Malevolent actions sow negative impressions, trapping the mind in a downward spiral of destructive habits and, you may say, compromised character. While these two frameworks may seem distinct, they are rarely viewed as incompatible within the broader tapestry of Hindu spiritual philosophy. Rather, they are deeply complementary facets of a single cosmic law, allowing an individual to embrace both external destiny and internal transformation simultaneously. However, the tradition is not entirely uniform. Certain schools choose not to maintain this dualism. A definitive example is found in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. While Patanjali employs terms like dharma and adharma, the structural equivalents of, say, merit and demerit, a closer reading of the Yoga Sutra text reveals that Patanjali interprets these metaphysical concepts entirely through the lens of samskaras. In doing so, Patanjali elegantly collapses the metaphysical explanation into the psychological one. For him, for Patanjali, karmic destiny is not an external force waiting in the wings of time. It is the living momentum of our own subconscious mind. This internal diversity highlights the richness of Indian philosophical thought, ancient Indian philosophical thought, offering profound, varied pathways to understanding how our choices shape both our minds and our fates. Now, my Thakur accepts and acknowledges both of these distinct interpretations of karma. The psychic explanation of karma is very vital and essential to my Thakur, given the elevated status he accords to the concept of vivek or conscience. However, to truly comprehend how my Thakur grants liberation to a soul, understanding the transcendental or metaphysical interpretation is paramount. And without that metaphysical narrative of karma, it wouldn't be possible to intervene in a soul's karma and deliver its salvation. Understood? Now, let's turn the searchlight into the idea of rebirth. The most important question that we faced is, what is the true nature of that which takes rebirth or reincarnates? What is the true nature of the entity that undergoes reincarnation? Isn't it? Unearthing a definitive answer to this most important question within the vast expanse of Indian philosophical texts is not that easy. No. It requires deep excavation. The ancient school of Shankha attributes reincarnation to the Sukha Sharir or the subtle body. But to serve as a repository for samskaras, the Sukha Sharir or the subtle body takes up the form of the mind according to Shankha. But mind itself is viewed as a refined subtle form of matter. It serves as a repository for samskaras, the latent mental impressions and behavioral tendencies accumulated across lifetimes. According to Shankha, it is the psychic framework that transmigrates. This view introduces a profound metaphysical dilemma. Shankha is fundamentally dualistic, all of you know. Dividing reality into Purush, which is pure sentient consciousness, and Prakriti, the insentient nature. Because the mind belongs entirely to Prakriti, it is technically devoid of consciousness. Now, it can be argued that an insentient entity cannot independently undergo the journey of rebirth. Reincarnation seems to logically require a spark of consciousness. This is where Shankha fails to address this problem. This is why Buddha also remains silent about Atma. Buddha neither explicitly rejects the concept of Atma, nor does he accept it. In the vocabulary of Buddhist philosophy, we find the word anatma. And as they are found to be agnostic about the idea of Ishwar, they have a similar approach towards the concept of Atma. By they, I mean the Buddhists. In stark contrast, the Nyaya school of Indian philosophy bypasses the concept of a subtle body altogether. They posit that it is the Atma, conceived here as the distinct individual soul, that journeys from one earthly existence to the next. Now, if you look through the lens of Vedanta, you will see that Vedanta harmonizes these opposing views by merging them into or to be more precise, to trying to merge them into a unified theory. Across various Vedantic lineages, the transmigrating entity is understood to be the Jivatma, the individual soul inextricably bound to the subtle body. This elegant synthesis is beautifully illustrated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, and the verse must be 8, yes. Shorirang jadabapnati chachaput kramitasara grihittoitani samjati vayurgandhani basharat. Beautiful. What does it mean? It means, as the air carries fragrance from place to place, so does the embodied soul carry the mind and senses with it when it leaves an old body and enters a new one. This verse from Gita describes how at the moment of death the Jivatma departs the physical body, departs the physical vessel, the Sthula Sharir, understood? Carrying the subtle body along with it. Sri Krishna here employs a striking metaphor to capture this transition. He says that just as the passing wind gathers and carries away the fragrance from a flower, the soul draws the subtle mind and senses from the discarded body in order to enter a new one. Understood? Now, when we ascend to Advaita Vedanta, the entire framework of rebirth is dissolved as an illusion. To understand this, Advaita introduces two distinct dimensions of reality: the Vyavaharika or the transactional or the empirical standpoint, which is the realm of everyday relative experience in which we live, listen, and interact. From this perspective, the individual soul bound to the subtle body does indeed undergo reincarnation. And there is the Paramarthika or the absolute standpoint, the ultimate truth of non-dual reality, and according to this concept, the individual soul, karma and rebirth, they all cease to exist. One realizes they have always been the timeless, birthless, pure consciousness. Now, this Paramarthika concept is echoed in my Thakur's that powerful statement where he says, Amra keu ashini. It's only from this Paramarthika standpoint that we can say that I am non-dual pure consciousness all along, and there's no such thing as individual souls. No karma, no rebirth. Okay? This is the idea of Ajadvad. But as you were sitting before me, looking at me, listening to me, my Elsa has brought some exquisite Swiss chocolates for me. All these things are happening from the empirical standpoint. So from this empirical or Vyavaharika standpoint, every Vedantic tradition, including the classical Advaita Vedanta, accepts the individual soul and the subtle body as a reincarnating entity. Now, this karma we speak of, what is its core and ultimate destiny? Bound up with it is the reason for our birth, the very purpose of existence. And that purpose is that we are here to be evolved and formed. We are here to learn and to grow. Okay? Grossly put this way. Now, let's for good turn our attention to the divine discourse of my Thakur of 2nd September 1985. At the beginning of this most extraordinary speech, my Thakur wants us to consider the flawless physiology and anatomy within our bodies in order to stress upon the hard truth that there's a profound subtle purpose behind this creation and behind our births. You know? That every aspect of our body is so meticulously arranged. As my Thakur says in their speech of 2nd September 1985, he says in Bengali, এটা একদম ছক করা কাজ, অদ্ভুত ব্যাপার। এই যে অদ্ভুত ব্যাপার যে সেটিংসটা, এটা অ্যাক্সিডেন্টালি হয় না। কেউ যেন হাতে ধরে ধরে অঙ্কের মতো সাজিয়ে দিয়েছে সুন্দরভাবে, পরপর 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 কার পরে কি হবে কার পরে কি হবে, এতটুকুনো ব্যাস কম বডি থাকবে না। অদ্ভুত ব্যাপার। ঠাকুর সেজ দেয়া এই যে অদ্ভুত ব্যাপারটা এত সহজে তোমরা পেয়ে যাচ্ছ, এত সহজে পাচ্ছ, অদ্ভুত ব্যাপারটা এত সহজে দেখতে পাচ্ছ, যার ব্যাপারটা এত অদ্ভুত, এত রহস্য, এত কারিগরি, এত আর্ট, তার উদ্দেশ্য শুধু জন্ম আর মৃত্যুতেই শেষ নয়। তার পরবর্তী অধ্যায় যদি না থাকে তাহলে এই সৃষ্টির কোনো মানেই হয় না। What does my Thakur say? He says, it's a perfect blueprint. The body, the Sthula Sharir or the physical body. Okay? He says, the physiology and anatomy of our physical body, it's extraordinary. This wondrous arrangement couldn't have happened by accident. It's as if someone painstakingly calculated it like a mathematical equation, beautifully sequencing one step after another. If even a tiny fraction were out of place, the body wouldn't survive. It's fascinating, isn't it? Understood? You have received this marvel so effortlessly, and you are witnessing its beauty so easily. But something built with such a profound mystery, intricate craftsmanship, and say sublime artistry, do you think that its purpose merely starts with birth and ends with death? If there isn't a chapter beyond this, then the universe itself makes no sense. This is what my Thakur wants to say here in the beginning of the speech of 2nd September 1985. Understood? Therefore, from a rational and logical platform, and you may call that from the standpoint of mathematics and simple common sense understanding, it seems utterly improbable that everything simply ceases to exist with the death of the physical body. Something must endure, isn't it? Just as I mentioned a while ago when I mentioned the 8th verse of the 15th chapter from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Sharirang Jadavapnati Jatchaput Kramotishara Grihitvaitani Sangjati Vayurgandhani Bashayat. Translated simply or grossly, it means that as the air carries fragrance, as I have said earlier, as the air carries fragrance from place to place, so does the embodied soul carry the mind and senses with it when it leaves an old body and enters a new one. Almost in a similar spirit, while speaking about death in his brilliant discourse of November 3rd, 1972, my Thakur remarked, ফুলটা এখানে, গন্ধটা চলে গেল চারিদিকে। তাতে ফুলটার তো কোনো কিছু হয়নি, ফুলটা তো এখানেই আছে, গন্ধটা হাজার লোকে পাচ্ছে, বেরিয়ে যাচ্ছে সেন্ট, গন্ধ দেখা যায়, গন্ধটা ধরা যায়, কিন্তু প্রত্যেকেই বলতে পারছি যে গন্ধটা পাচ্ছি। গন্ধটা তো একটুখানি, কিন্তু দেখো হাজার লোক পাচ্ছে। It means that the flower remains here. Here, flower is the metaphor of the physical body, you know. My Thakur says that the flower remains here while its fragrance spreads everywhere, yet nothing has happened to the flower itself. It still sits right there. Thousands of people are experiencing its aroma. The fragrance is drifting out. Can you say what you call scent? Thakur is asking, can you grasp it? And yet everyone says I can experience it. The fragrance itself is so subtle, so minute, yet thousands are touched by it. Just as the true essence of a flower lies in its scent, in a familiar fashion, the Sukha Sharir or the subtle body holds the essence of the Sthula Sharir or the physical body. A withered flower stays grounded while its fragrance fills the air. Likewise, in death, the physical body is cast aside while the Sukha Sharir or the subtle body breaks free and spreads outward. Understood? Now, look, this brings to my mind a certain idea, grossly put, from quantum physics. From the platform of physics, a very general and gross comparison can be made in this way. You have heard about wave particle duality? Haven't you all? Okay. When a quantum entity is traveling freely and unobserved, it behaves like a wave. It then exists in what you call a superposition of multiple states or paths simultaneously. The moment one interacts with it, its wave function collapses and it starts acting like a classical particle. You all know? This phenomenon gets prominent in the subatomic or the microworld. Wave-particle duality can be roughly imagined as a software-hardware dichotomy. Now, grossly imagined, the particle aspect represents the tangible hardware of the subatomic ring, resembling tiny spheres in perpetual rattling motion. Conversely, the wave aspect serves as the system's software, its mind, or say its inherent data. This is because the quantum wave defies all classical intuition. It is not composed of physical matter or substance, but is instead a wave of pure information and potential knowledge. Rather than a physical undulation of the atom or the subatomic particle itself, it maps the boundaries of what can actually be known about that particular particle. No quantum physicist has ever suggested that an atom physically dissolves into a ripple across space. Rather, what truly diffuses and spreads is the horizon of what an observer can possibly discover about that subatomic particle. This information stuff or the wave faculty of a subatomic particle can be grossly compared with the subtle body, which I am discussing here. Okay? I am just making a gross comparison to make you people understand easily. The transcendental or the metaphysical narrative of karma that I touched upon at the very beginning of my discourse becomes profoundly relevant here. The Shukkha Sharir or the subtle body behaves much like a wave-like or informational aspect of existence. Just as subatomic particles elude the ordinary human senses and require highly sensitive instruments to be detected, this informational wave of the subtle body remains imperceptible to the average person and even to seekers who have attained a modicum of spiritual elevation. Only those who have ascended to the highest realms of consciousness can truly perceive the state of the subtle body. Understood? Furthermore, the grandest among them possess the power to intervene in this state and alter its course. My Thakur, you must have heard, as a young boy, a few days after the passing of his cousin Anango, my Thakur brought him back in broad daylight so that Anango's mother can see Anango. Anango's mother was very dear to my Thakur. Her name was Sharola. We used to call her Sharola Mashima. This bringing of Anango from the Vidhi state is what we call Ishwar Anugraha or divine grace. In the philosophy of yoga, those who occupy this high state of realization are referred to as Prakriti-Lin Purush. The great souls merged in cosmic nature. Similarly, Vedanta defines God as Karmafal Data, the divine dispenser of the fruits of one's actions. For now, until you awaken to finer and higher levels of spiritual perception, you may look upon my Thakur as a Prakriti-Lin Purush or Karmafal Data himself. Whatever definition you find convenient according to your spiritual temperament. Understood? My Thakur alone holds the power to dissolve the staggering burdens of our karma accumulated over millions of lifetimes, guiding us decisively towards ultimate fulfillment or the ultimate goal of creation. A true guru is thus one who assumes and bears the entire burden of his disciple or devotee. This is precisely why my Thakur used to say that the authority to initiate or give Dikha belongs solely to one who has blossomed into realization right from birth. This is what Janma Siddha is all about, My Thakur often remarked, ঠেলা গাড়ি নিজেই চলতে পারে না, সে অন্যকে কিভাবে টানবে? It means a handcart cannot move on its own. How then can it pull someone else? So logical. Therefore, only a Janmasiddha or a naturally perfect, spiritually liberated soul is worthy of granting initiation, or what you call Diksha. The spiritual or religious gurus you see around here are not actually liberated souls or Mukta Purush. This is why I constantly try to remind you how priceless my Thakur is. So, for the remaining days you reside in your gross physical bodies, strive to immerse yourselves exclusively in my Thakur. You will need nothing else.